I decided to focus on two specific cases, Belgrade and Bor. That is how the Jews in Belgrade and in Bor they were victims of the forced labor system. I will be very brief, since this issue, as we have seen from other presentations, it was already mentioned that around 10,000 Jews were in the Bor camp and also in Belgrade, especially in the beginning of the occupation. They were forced to clear the city of rubble. We also have photos, so I will not use the other presentation. I will just go through the photos and the documents that Nikola used to add something. This photo is, for example, from April, probably end of April 1941. It is already clear that although the system, the real occupation system was not yet in place, but what was in place was the forced labor for Jews. So this is one of the first measures that the German occupying force introduced, was the forced labor for Jews. Specifically on this picture, what you can see, it is said that it is the registration of Jews. It probably isn't the registration. I believe that it is an everyday situation that happened in April 1941, where groups of men, Jews, had to go to work every day. It functioned in a certain way. The German occupier, through various structures it had, introduced certain rules, certain orders, and it ordered that men, Jews, had to go to forced labor, primarily to clear the city of Belgrade of rubble of the bombing, but they were used for other works as well, as the research has shown, primarily the research of Dr. Milan Koljanin. They used to work in the docks to load and unload goods and to repair the sewerage system, but also in the beginning they were used by German officers or local Volksdeutsche for their private needs. When the local administration was established, in this case the gendarmerie, the police and the gendarmerie, the Germans decided to leave part of the organization and control to the local gendarmerie, specifically, as you can see on this picture. Local Serbian gendarmes had the task of distribute these people based on German needs and orders. Very simply, it proceeded very simply. The Germans, based on the situation in the city, but on the destruction site, they made a plan how to put the city back in order, and every day they ordered the local police, that is the gendarmerie, to distribute certain groups of Jews to repair a certain quarter of the city or certain specific streets or certain sewerage systems. We have documents that Nikola has shown, those lists of workers who had this daily task. This happened in April. In late May, regulated in the most efficient way. You all know the order of the 30th of May, which refers to the Jews and the Gypsies. Introducing one of the items about forced labor of Jews and Roma. So forced labor was to continue until the destruction of the Jewish community. As it was mentioned, although since August 1941, primarily men, Jews from Banat, and then from Belgrade, although they were in the Topovsky Shupa camp, they were taken to forced labor every day. We know some cases, like the case in Smederevo, where they were used also outside the city, not only in Belgrade, but also in this case in Smederevo. When the Topovsky Shupa camp is concerned, we know that it was set up in mid-August 1941. It was intended primarily to the Jews from Banat, that is men, and we know that it operated until the end of November 1941, so only for several months, when until the early December, when the Logorin Saimishte was established, and when around 200 or 300 men were transferred from Topovsky Shupe to the Saimishte camp, the fairground camp. They were taken to forced labor. Large groups were also at the same time taken to be shot, which tells us about the function, the role of this camp. It was set up in the beginning in order for these Jews to be kept under control. A camp that was not established as a place from which people would be taken to their death, but a camp which very soon after a month and a half becomes the location from which all of them would be taken to be shot. It happened primarily because of the decision of the top level commanders in Germany, which decided that in territories where resurrections appeared, that the 100 hostages should be shot for each German soldier killed and 50 for each German soldier wounded. These are the reprisal measures which would affect primarily Jews in Serbia, and also communist partisans, and then also Roma and other categories of people. They were taken to work all the time, and among other things, this is the way in which the Germans used to take people to be shot seamlessly. This is known from the testimonies that concern the Jews and the Roma. Often forced labor was used as an excuse at these points on the days when the groups were taken from the camps to be shot. It happened that the large groups would travel by trucks to Jabuka, for example, the place that was determined as a shooting place, and that there were tools on the truck, so that people were convinced that they would be going to forced labor, that they would come back. We know, however, that they didn't come back. The others were told that the groups were transferred to Germany and to other places. You can see that also from the reports that we have. There are two well-known reports of Lieutenant Lipp and Walter, which clearly show that this forced labor was used also as an excuse, as a way of avoid any possible insurrection by the prisoners. We know from testimonies that, for example, there was a relation between the Jewish hospital and the Topolsky Shupa camp. The Jewish community could have its hospital at that point because they were banned from using all other hospitals, and we know that the most serious patients from the camps, through the testimonies we have, they had the opportunity to be transferred to this hospital, which was located in the city, quite near this place in Doricho. And we know that sometimes doctors use this opportunity to save the lives of people. They would keep the people in the hospital and make a connection, a link with the partisans or other people who could hide these people. These are just fragmentary memories and traces of these events. The question is, of course, this issue has not been researched enough, but what can be relevant for historiography is how important was this forced labor of Jews for Belgrade from April until the end of November or early December 1941. How important was it for the city itself? And of course, the other issue that could be researched was what the relations were between the gendarmerie officers and the Jews in forced labor. Their everyday relationship, were their attempts to save some of the Jews. How did these events develop and this work? This should be much better researched. And another issue that I will mention is the issue of Jews in the Bor camp. We realized that the Bor camp is one of the most important places for the forced labor in Serbia, perhaps even in southeastern Europe. The Bor camp consisted of 33 sub-locations, sub-camps. It is an enormous complex. And these camps were on the way from Bor to Kostolac, in between two places that were linked in the exploitation of the natural resources of the occupied Serbia. Every time the camp was named after a German city, someone mentioned Dresden, Berlin, and others. These are different categories of prisoners. They were prisoners of war, political prisoners. In some of the camps there were civilians through the National Labor Service, through this compulsory work that we mentioned this morning, and in some others were Jews. With regard to Jews, in fact, as it has already been mentioned, there were 10,000 Hungarian Jews. The Bor complex had a strange status. There were guards and commanders, Hungarians, that is taught, the organization taught. But what is important to mention, as we were told when we visited Bor, is that this camp was in fact outside the territory of Serbia. It was directly under the command of Berlin. And it is really important. That is the reason why the Jews from Hungary were brought there. The question is why these groups were taken there from Hungary. This was also mentioned this morning. There was an agreement between the Germans and the Hungarians, that is the Hungarian government. So, as Professor Istovic said, it was about an exchange. The Germans wanted 10,000 workers, and they would give every month 100 tons of the concentrate of the copper ore to the Hungarian government, and then 6 tons of chrome a month. So on the one hand, they wanted a labor force, and in return, they were ready to offer copper or chrome. The first transport of the Hungarian Jews started on the 11th of July, the second on the 20th of July, and the third group on the 30th of June. And with the Jews, there were Jehovah's Witnesses. And the fourth group only at the end of October. After the German occupation of Hungary, another group was sent of around 3,000 Jews in mid-March 1944. So from March 1944, there were around 6,000 to 7,000 Jews there. They were primarily prisoners of the Berlin camp, and from this camp they were distributed to other camps. Of course, there are testimonies testifying to the very difficult living and working conditions they had, and the most tragic perhaps is their end. The March of Death, so-called March of Death, which happened in September of 1944, when the Red Army was approaching from the east, and it was already clear that the Red Army would enter Serbia, and that this part of Serbia would fall under the control. The Germans decided to withdraw, and to withdraw these groups of Jews, and as it is well known from literature, this group had to go on foot to withdraw through Vojvodina. In some places, shootings took place, primarily of those who were the most seriously ill, that they couldn't go on. We know of these shooting sites. The biggest shooting took place in Crvenka, where around 680 to up to 700 people were killed. Those who weren't killed on the way were deported into camps in Germany, from where very few of them returned. There are testimonies about that. There are certain memories, and tomorrow when we visit Bor, we will have an opportunity to listen to this and to see this. There is a memory filmed by the Hungarian television in 2006, which is translated into Serbian. We will be able to see this film. And there are written memories which the Bor Library has scanned and uploaded to its internet, to its web page. It is also important because there is an opportunity for these books that were mentioned this morning. They can be freely downloaded or read online. This was just a brief cursory overview of this issue. It requires much deeper research that we will have an opportunity during the second part of the project to research. Okay, thank you for your attention.